everyone, and welcome to Deckbuilding Derezzed. I am your host, Code Marvelous, and today I am joined by Grayson, otherwise known as Mordeqai.
Hey there.
Thanks very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been really excited to do this.
Yeah, man. And you've got a deck archetype that I'm really excited about called Giant Dav, which has quite a few permutations now. But before we get into that, Grayson, why don't you tell everybody watching a little bit about your Netrunner story, how you came to play the game, how long you've been playing, and what's kind of attracting you to this type of archetype.
Yeah, sure thing. I started during the Plugged In tour. I think that was one of the very first tournaments I went to. And one of my friends from, I think it was War Machine that I was playing at that time, ended up playing Netrunner during the Genesis cycle. And he got me into the game, and we got a couple other people into it, and we had a core group of like 5 or 6 people.
Right.
And we ended up going to just so many regionals and whatnot. It really formed itself into a hobby once it was, every 2 weeks we had a tournament to go to on Saturday.
Right.
And it was, it was just a really good time. So I kept doing it just because I liked the group that I was with. I liked everyone that I got to meet at all the different tournaments. Especially going up to Chicago, there were a lot of, I don't know, it was like a little family reunion every time you got to see everyone.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And so that's what kept me going. As far as this specific deck type goes, just pretty much in any game that I've ever played, I've liked Prison or just, general end game long strategies. All my Corp decks are totally Prison or very, very late game decks. And it's hard to make a render like that. I've tried a lot of times in the past. I tried Nexus Gate for a really long time. Then I tried Dane's Congress, which Giant Dad is pretty much based on. And eventually put in so many tech slots that it did eventually just become Runner Prison.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. What faction did you play when you played War Machine?
I played Circle for the longest time.
So you played Hordes.
Oh yes, sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm a old Protector and Mercenaries player, but that's neither here nor there. So let's talk about the build. Let's just start with the ID. Why is a deck like this type of Runner Prison, as you said, why are we using Kate as opposed to another Shaper identity?
Well, the main reason you use Kate is because you're trying to get to that end game goal as quickly as possible in as few turns as possible. And so you want to attain your, like 6-trip and Tapworm and Satcons and everything. You want to get to that state as soon as you can. And Kate just generally helps that the most. She has a link so she can get the Underworld contacts online really quickly for the most part. And then just usually ends up saving you a credit or 2 credits per turn, depending on whether or not you can SMC on their turn and whatnot.
Yeah.
I considered Haley for the longest time, and there are versions of the deck that run in Haley, but you have to tweak them a little bit just because she's missing that link, and that's really what swayed it to Kate.
Yeah. If you have to get 2 link on the board to get the Underworld contacts going, it is a lot tougher than it sounds.
Right, and then Haley had to run 3 rabbit holes on top of Dyson's usually, and that's just a lot of deck slots.
Yeah. So let's talk about the deck itself. Where do you want to start?
I probably just the core engine of all the drip and economy and how it actually keeps up with the core.
Okay, so let's start with the resources. We've got 1 Beth. It's worth noting that we have a Magnum Opus, so the Beth and Magnum Opus synergy is pretty strong.
Yeah. Once the corp's over 15 credits, she basically just gains you 2 credits or 2 cards a turn.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Now, data folding is one of the core components of this deck that you kind of have to play around as you set up, because it's a 1 drip, but you have to have 2 or more unused MU.
Right. And I get a lot of flack for running data folding. But I like it. The end game board state is set up to have 2 MU free at pretty much all times. And with as many disposable things you have as like Clot and Tapworm and just not having to install all your breakers immediately, you can usually trigger this pretty much every turn with no problem.
Yeah, so to bring up the other piece of drip, Bad Phone Guy, Underworld Contact and Data Folding. The idea of this deck is that the drip makes it so that once you vamp people down to 0, you're just outpacing them on economy every turn. And you're just able to hold them down.
Once you can get them to 0, you can pretty much always stay on top.
Right. So we've got a single film critic, because I hear not dying is really great.
Yeah, it's good against Future Perfect, Argus, mid-seasons, and just everything. It also keeps your New Angeles alive, which is really helpful against NBN.
Yeah. New Angeles is also really good for click compression with vamp.
Yes, very much.
Now, one of the cards that you've added recently, which I like, is the Laguna Velasco district. Tell me a little bit about the inclusion of this over previously there was like diesels and quality times in here.
I like Laguna a lot. It's pretty much all the draw in the deck at this point. It's the only difficulty with it is that it's hard to install before your economy. So it's a little awkward to use, but once it's actually up and running, you can get through the rest of your deck so quickly.
Yeah.
So usually first or second or third turn, somewhere around there, you can usually piece in our time, then drop Laguna, draw two, and install something else, and from there you're good to go.
Yeah. We got New Angeles, as we discussed, which helps you avoid tags, which is really good for people's tag BS, like 24/7.
Yeah. It's good for that. Data Raven is a surprising counter. It has because a lot of people put a QPM behind a Data Raven and think they're good to go, or DRTs or what else.
What have you? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or the data ward behind the Data Raven, that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, that Thoth it's really good against, and IP block, it's weirdly very helpful against.
Yep, because then you're just like, all right, fire the trace. All right, I don't care. And we got 3 Sacons, which are for a couple of pieces that we'll talk about later, but there's a lot of things that just need to be able to stay on the board for a long time.
Yes. Yeah, and this just completely protects you. There's a lot of one-up tech cards in this deck, like Clot, that needs to stay alive, and especially with like Scorpios around and everything, it's difficult to do that anymore.
Right. You can't be recurring it from the trash. It's got to stay on the table.
Mm-hmm. And then Feedback Filter, I've seen Jinteki decks start to gear towards with like Power Grid Overload and whatnot. And it's nice to just keep that alive because that's really your only solution against a lot of Jinteki decks.
Yeah. We've got a single Sol set slums so that when we trash things, they stay gone forever.
Yep. It's just good.
Yep. So where do you want to go now that we've done resources? Do you want to go up events, or what do you want to do?
We can go through the events because those are actually pretty related to the resources.
So we've got 2 levies.
Mm-hmm. The levies are mostly there to recur vamps or clots or tapeworms for the most part, but they also get you your piece and your times back. And late game, they let you get populist rally out a lot. And if you can populist rally every turn, it's really difficult for the corp to create a scoring window.
Okay. So we have 3 peace in our times, which is just a really fine card when you're going to set up. Just really good.
And it combos super well with Tapeworm.
Yep. So these next 5 cards are very new. I haven't played the version since you've added these. Talk to me about these as stall cards. You have 2 populist rallies, which I'm going to go over it because I think a lot of people probably aren't super familiar with it. It's a 2-cost event that if you have at least 1 CD card installed, the corp has 1 fewer clicks to spend on their next turn.
Mm-hmm. This serves a couple different purposes. Mostly, it's to keep people from scoring out. Like when you're playing against Palma and they install Advance and Nisei, you can just install Slums and just prevent them from winning for 1 more turn. And in that turn that you can prevent them, and this also goes for Price of Freedom, you can piece in our time first to make sure you can get in the next turn.
Yeah. Price of Freedom, sacrifice a connection. So, connections, we have Beth, Film Critic, and Underworld Contact. So we have a total of 5 cards, which can trigger the Price of Freedom, which says that the corp cannot advance cards during their next turn.
Yep. This can be used in a couple different ways. For the most part, I usually sack Film Critic. Because in most matchups it's pretty much dead and it just gets me a free turn.
Alright, so the last event we have in this deck is Vamp. It's really the central card of the deck, I would say.
Right.
Talk to me a little about how to understand when to use it and what its role is.
So what you're looking to do, your basic win condition is to get a bunch of drip on the board, probably like 5 or 6 between Beth and Tapeworm and all the foldings and stuff. And then once you can secure an advantage, in that sense and get more credits in the corp, you probably want like an extra 20 or 30 or so. And then you make sure you can vamp them to 0 on click 1 or 2. And then after that, you can deal with pretty much anything else. You can go in Slums the Caprice. You can hit R&D 3 times with Equivocation. And then that's really what locks the corp down. And you can keep them down by vamping 2 more times.
Nice.
So it just gets the corp down and keeps them there.
So as far as hardware, we've got Astrolabe, pretty par for the course. It is like the Shaper console if you don't really need a specific console that does something.
Yeah. There have been a lot of different consoles in this deck. I've tried Ubax, I've tried Toolbox.
I like
Guide.
Ubax in this.
I do too. It was just too expensive. The reason I went with Astrolabe is Estelle ETF is by far the hardest matchup. And Astrolabe, if you can get one early, just really helps secure that match.
That's fair. We have 2 clone chips for some of our opening tools and things like that.
Yeah. You only really need one. One is going to help you keep a clot thread on the board or get a tapworm back, but the second one is mostly just for speed and setting up, because after you put down a self-modifying code and use it, you can throw down a clone chip, and that's basically just another self-modifying code.
Right.
And that's nice.
We have 3 Dyson Mem chips, which give us that sweet, sweet Link and sweet, sweet MU that we crave in this deck.
Yep, and that's pretty much all there is about it.
And we have a feedback filter, which, as you discussed, keeps us safe from a lot of different net damage builds that are going to be very threatening to our one-of tools.
Yeah, it's mostly for bioethics. Your plan there is to, again, get a bunch of drip and just mash Magnum 4 to 5 times a turn. And eventually they just can't touch you and they'll have to put something down and score it, and then you just go steal it.
Alright, so let's talk about Breaker Suite. So, as our Fractor, we have Enkuza, which is so often unused that they never bothered to update the art on Meteor from the spoiler.
Wow. I've never seen anyone else run Enkuza. I'm hoping for the day that I see someone else use it. But Enkuza is so underrated. It's twice as good as a Derez. Because on top of wasting their credits, they also have to reinstall it. And if you can vamp them and then use Enkuza a couple times, you've really clogged their hand with Equivocation and whatnot. And then they just can't recover from that.
That's fair. So it's Shrike's pretty good. It's Cloud.
It's mostly for Tour Guide and Kamainu, and
what ails
that's
you?
it.
Yeah, what ails you?
It also saves a memory. It's just generally the most efficient Sentry Breaker in the game, for the most part.
Yeah. And then we've got Study Guide. There's a lot of code gates these days. Like a lot.
Yeah. Especially Fairchild 3. You see that all the time. I've ran Gordian and Zoo in this list, but Study Guide is just by far leagues better.
Yeah.
Because after the second time, it's just strictly better than Gordian.
Right.
And
it's like a Gordian, but forever.
Yeah, exactly. And if you break if you're only breaking 3 Fairchilds in a game to break even, I think that's pretty par for the course.
Yeah. So we've got a Clot.
Yep, it does clot things.
Yep, we got an Egret, which is also another Terminal Directive edition, right?
Yeah, Egret was a really recent addition, and it's done a lot of different things for me. There's a lot of ice like Susanoo or Chiashi or a couple other things like that. They're just really expensive with this Breaker Suite. And Egret helps you either turn them into a barrier so they're not a problem with Enkuza, or turn them into nothing with Study Guide once it's up.
Nice. We've got Equivocation, which is one of our primary win conditions. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. After you get the vamp down, generally that's when you go for Equivocations and you just hit RMD as much as you can. It's not a great multi-access tool, but it's the only multi-access tool of its power level where you can only slot one and assuredly get it all the time. So It's just a very slot-efficient multi-access.
Okay. And we've got 1 Magnum Opus.
Yep. Again, it's money. A lot of times endgame, while you're waiting for a good time to vamp, you're just mashing Magnum.
Yeah, it's really good. And it's good for what ails you where everyone is tagging and hunting resources.
Exactly.
So we've also got 3 SMCs, which does SMC stuff, and then one of the primary economic cards of this deck is Tapworm.
Yeah, and this one's kind of difficult to play. A lot of people have been learning to play against it. I used to be able to just install it turn 1 and have it for the rest of the game on one SatCon, and people just don't let you do that anymore. So a lot of times you have to wait until you've installed 2 SatCons or so, and then install it, and then after that it just keeps you going.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll wait until I have a SatCon or 2, and then I'll wait till there's an agenda down that they want to score, and I'll be like, you could purge, or you could score that agenda, and then they score the agenda and they'll like forget about it.
Yep. It also combos pretty well with populist rally because they can't purge next turn.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good. That's good. This is the list. It looks solid. Let's take it for a spin.
Yeah.
For everybody watching at home, you can look up Mordeqai. It's Mordeqai with a K. He has a lot of really great lists.
It's still with a Q.
It was like, what did I say? A K?
K.
Yeah,
it's QAI.
QAI. I'm sorry. I meant Q, but I said K. Anyway.
Oh, it's fine. It's my fault.
Why? I don't know.
Because I spell it wrong.
He has got a lot of really interesting lists. There's a lot of really good RP and a lot of really good just yeah, various prisons.
Pretty much all prison.
Yeah, but if that's your thing, then check it out. There's a lot of really good builds there. Yeah, Grayson, thank you very much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yep, we're gonna head to the test run, everybody. So we'll see you there. And until we do, always be running.